We're calling this the Tuesday, September 6th, 2023 Committee on Aging meeting to order. Bobby, would you call the roll, please?
Joanne Murphy Spice.
Here.
Julie Kiefer.
Here.
Julie Davids.
Here.
Bryn Siemens excused. Patricia Yurovitz.
Here.
Julie Maslowski.
Here.
Judy Ritchie.
Here.
Mike Ford is excused. Cynthia Thorpe.
Here.
Allie Ford is excused. Jean Wallerman.
Here.
Thank you. Moving on, the approval of the May 2nd minutes. Does anyone have any additions or corrections? Okay, I do. The last paragraph under new business, the last sentence needs to be rewritten to Ms. Ritchie announced that iHeartRadio has rated Lake Winnebago as the most beautiful lake in Wisconsin. It was written a little bit out of order there. Other than that, I have nothing. So, motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Okay.
A second.
Okay. Motion made and approved. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Do we have any citizen statements?
None.
Public comments?
None.
Okay. Moving on, our presentation today is Pat Jurovitz, talking on seniors and gambling addiction.
All right. That got to me pretty quick. All right. Okay, so I'm Pat Yurovitz, and I'm a semi-retired art therapist and problem gambling counselor. And I've been with the Wisconsin Council on Problem Gambling for almost 20 years in various capacities. I started out answering their helpline and soon realized this is a really big problem, and then I got the training to become a counselor. And then I started training the trainers and doing presentations, and I'm currently on the board of directors. So I'm happy to share with you what I know about gambling today. So what we're going to go over is what is gambling, what are some of the risk factors, some of the protective factors, not all gambling is bad, and where and what kind of help is there for you. The mission of the Wisconsin Council is they provide resources, public awareness, and education on gambling disorders while maintaining strict neutrality on the issue of legalized gambling. So the council does not take any stand on whether gambling should be legal or illegal. We just kind of work with the problem as it is. In 1991, some of you probably remember that was the first gaming compact with the Indian tribes in the state of Wisconsin. And in 1993, some concerned citizens in Green said, hey, gambling's a big problem here. We need to do something about it. And so they got a grant to start a helpline. So it only took 2 years for gambling to be a noticeable problem. So what is gambling? Gambling is to place something of value at risk for the chance of obtaining something of greater value. If I ask you what is gambling, some people will say going to casinos. Gambling is card games. It can be poker, blackjack, nickel ante sheephead is still gambling. There's lotteries, pull tabs, online gaming, a lot of the sports betting. We've been around for a while, the horses, and now football, and of course fantasy football. So gambling comes in many forms. And most gambling is social and it's fun, and it's an accepted form of entertainment. And it's been used to fund public projects such as bridges and roads and even some universities out east back like in the 1700s. So it's gone from being for public works to just entertainment and fun, and for some people a problem. So when does it become a problem? There's still an element of risk and something of value, but there's a change in the mood The mood of the gambler becomes very unpleasant and very desperate. Therefore, it's not just the risk of money or the desire to win. And gamblers continue to gamble even though there's negative consequences to their gambling. They don't stop. So does everyone who gambles a lot have a gambling problem? No, they don't. You can gamble if you stay within your limits that you set for yourself. You aren't chasing the big win. I mean, you probably don't have a problem. Probably 90% of us will do some form of gambling. It'll be fun. We'll have a good time. We go home. 10% of us will gamble longer than we anticipated. We're going to spend more money than we planned on. We'll go home upset with ourselves that we didn't stop and probably have to brown bag our lunches for the rest of the week because we spent all our food money. 3% of that 10% will stay way too long, be unable to leave because their machine is ready to hit really soon. They may have maxed out their credit cards. They'll leave angry at the facility, angry at the machine, and angry at themselves. And when they get home, they're going to lie about something, either where they've been or how much they spent. They estimate in Wisconsin we have over 300,000 potentially problem gamblers. And that's why we need to be concerned. Okay. I went too far here, didn't I? I'm going the wrong way, sorry. There. Okay. What are some problematic behaviors? What contributes to it? Loss of physical health. Many seniors are dealing with mobility and energy issues. You know, you can't do the same activities you did years ago. So that casinos are one, very accommodating to people with physical disabilities. They have machines that you can come up to with a wheelchair. They're accommodating to everybody who walks in the door. So when you can't do some of your old activities, that's generally an activity you can do. There are a lot more gambling than just at the casinos, but most callers to the helpline, when you ask them where they do most of their gambling, it is casino gambling that they're calling about. The loss of social support. The CDC recently put out a report that said loneliness and isolation are serious issues for health issues for elderly. 1 in 4 adults over 65 are considered to be socially isolated. So social isolation leads to depression, anxiety, and suicide. And we also know that 1 in 5 gamblers attempt suicide. It's the highest suicide rate among all addictions. The more one gambles, the more one feels bad. It's called a hidden addiction because there is no blood test that will say you just gambled for 12 hours. You don't pass out from it, and you don't smell any differently because you were gambling somewhere. So, and people, the stigma around gambling is still that it's willpower. Just stop. You can stop, but it's not really that easy. No. So some of the things that contribute to gambling is the gambler's big high, their big win. The big win can be anything from $10 to $10,000. It doesn't matter the monetary amount. If it gave you a rush of like, yes, I won, then you chase that high. You want to feel that way again. Gamblers also, we get that high when we win. I put $10 in a machine somewhere. If I win 20, I'm going, yes, cashing out, buying lunch, you know. But a gambler gets that high with a near win. You know, if you had those old machines that had cherries. If you had 2 cherries and a half a cherry coming up, their dopamine is going to kick off like if they won. It's like, almost, the next bet's going to win. You know, and so they keep going. And pretty soon their dopamine kicks off when they place the bet. So that's why it becomes a problem, is because it's placing the bet that gives them the high, not the win. So, so they have to go after it. And you hear stories every now and then. I was $10,000 up, or I was $5,000 up, and you're going, why didn't you cash out? Then they go, well, it went down from 10 to 9 to 8 to 7, and you're going, now why didn't you cash out, right? We would have. But they are excited about placing that bet. And so they a lot of times end up thousands of dollars in the hole because the machine is going to hit. It almost hit last time, and now it's going to hit. So that near high is when the dopamine spikes for those gamblers. And there's also a connection between Parkinson's disease and some medications, restless leg and Parkinson's, Mirapex and Requip. Those can increase the urge to gamble, and along with Abilify can also do that. Increases your urges to gamble as well as to binge eat, shop, sex. Some of these medications have to be looked at carefully. Okay, so loneliness is known to affect single men, not so much single women. Sitting on a machine can zone you out, so you don't have to feel the pain of loneliness, sadness, depression. You can distract yourself from not being able to play pickleball anymore or not being able to go dancing. You don't have to think about all the money you have spent, that you said you were going to leave your family and now it's not there. You don't have to feel anything when you're gambling. You just have to make the next bet. And so older adults, baby boomers. Baby boomers are being sought after by the gaming industry because we have extra money, because we have time. We're many times looking for escape from all these various things, having to take care of family members. We need a little bit of break ourselves. So the opportunity is there. If I asked you, 15 years ago, where can you go gamble? Everybody would say, well, Oneida. Help. I just leaned on it.
That's okay.
I don't know how to get out of trouble, only into trouble.
You're in the right place if you need to get out of trouble.
Okay. That's all right, I just did that before. Oh, no, I did it again. Okay, there we go. That's where I was. Thank you. Okay. If I asked you 15 years ago, where can you go place a bet? And you'd have said, well, you got to drive to Oneida in Green Bay. 5 years ago, if I asked you, where do you place a bet? You just said, oh, nearest restaurant or bar or Quick Trip, because they all have machines in them. It's like, oh, so if today I ask you, where do you go to place a bet, where do you go? Your computer, your phone, it's right on your phone. So as the availability increases, so does the amount of problem gamblers. It increases right with it. And us older women aren't out of the clear here. When we think of problem gambling, we most always think of men. However, we are catching up to them. Women start gambling at a later age, usually 54. Men start at 33. But it takes men generally 16 years of gambling before it becomes a problem. It takes women 5. We're overachievers, ladies. Yeah, more efficient. Yeah. So what happens when mom is the gambler? There's 2 things that keep women from getting help, and it's the shame and guilt of having the problem and the shame and resentment of failing to meet society's expectations of her. So generally, mom is the glue that holds the family together. And so when someone needs comfort or safety, they go to mom. And now mom is someone they can't trust. It really is devastating to the family when mom is the gambler, because you can't trust mom, and mom has put the household in a tailspin. And the person that they go to when there's trouble is the one that caused the trouble. So it can be very devastating when the woman is the big problem gambler. Signs gambling is becoming a problem. You know, increased amounts of money, lying to family and friends about the extent of the gambling, hiding the losses. Takes a lot of energy and time to do that. Unsuccessful attempts to stop. Most gamblers have tried a number of times to stop. Keep gambling despite of the negative consequences. Withdrawing from family and friends because they borrowed so much from family and friends. They aren't going to go to them anymore because they're going to ask for their money, which they don't have, or they're going to find out that, oh, she borrowed money from you too, you too borrowed her money, and all of a sudden the problem gets to be very known. And chasing losses. Anybody who says they're going to any gambling machine or going online to get their money because the casino has their money or the machine has their money, that's not a good sign because they're chasing their losses. And considering gambling to be the only form of recreation that they can do now. Like I said, if you have physical disabilities and you can't do the activities you did in the past, starting to play a game on your phone is good, and just making it more challenging for yourself. So. Okay. Who falls into that 90%? I said 90% of us just are fun gamblers, social gamblers. We'll gamble, go home. People who go to church. People who have a large social support network. Have a great variety of activities, both physical, mental, and social. People who are married have higher education and higher income. That doesn't exclude you from being a problem gambler at a higher income, but probability is less. And a reason to get out of bed. We all need a reason to get up in the morning. So what treatment is out there? Well, first is the helpline. I'll be giving you a little packet that has the helpline number on. Helpline is we have live people answering the phones 24/7, 365 days out of the year, so you always get a real person. There's GA and Gam-Anon meetings around. Oshkosh has one GA meeting once a week. They're not as plentiful as AA and not as accepted as AA. People don't like to advertise that they're crappy with their money, you know. So the GA meetings, they tend to not stay at the meetings for years like they do with AA. There's only 3 Gam-Anon meetings in the state that meet regularly, but if you call the helpline and a family member wants to talk with someone who went through this, they will set you up with a Gam-Anon member that you can talk to. So there is help for the families out there. The trained counselors, Winnebago has 3 of us, 1 in Neenah and 2 in Oshkosh. Green Bay only has 3 trained counselors for that big city. So there's a big need for the counselors. And there's no inpatient treatment for gambling in the state of Wisconsin. So if you need to be hospitalized, you have to go to Illinois or Minnesota. Older adults are most likely to seek help from their primary physicians, but most physicians, gambling isn't on their radar. You know, they aren't screening for it. And there's a real easy 2-question screen that's 95% reliable as far as identifying a potential gambling behavior, gambling behavior, and it's, have you ever lied about how much you gamble, and have you ever felt the need to bet more money? 2 questions. You know, so we're trying at this point to get physicians to ask those questions. The helpline answers 12 to 1,400 calls a month. The hits on our website are about 1,000 a month. So there is, people are reaching out and are finally knowing a little bit about us, that we exist. So, yeah, it's a family affair. Problem gambling is an emotional illness that leads to the gambler to believe that the only way to fix his problems is to hit it big one more time. Let's hit it big one more time. And so what is damaged in that? The trust, respect, reputation of the gambler, the financial security, the negative impacts on the family are as they were manipulated by that gambler. They're lying to cover up and make excuses for the gambler with their family and friends. Kind of that role imbalance. One of the triggers for gambling is money. And so one of the first things in treatment is you take away the control of the money. And so it's very hard for, say, a spouse to all of a sudden take control of the money when maybe the gambler is the one who controlled the money the whole marriage. And now you're saying, you can't write a check, you have to give it to your spouse to write. You know, and some cultures, the male is the person who does this and the female doesn't, so you have to involve a brother or an uncle with them. So there's a lot of stigma with that. You know, and the family member, it gets exhausted. They're trying to keep their parent from gambling anymore. They're trying to keep them out of jail for legal stuff. They're trying to keep them from being homeless. There's a lot of stress on the family. And so there's a lot of gambling problem out there, and there's also a lot of help for everybody. It can't be cured, but it certainly can be controlled. And this is the part of the presentation where I probably would have you draw your first gambling experience. The art therapy in me would want to be curious. However, instead of drawing that, I'll answer questions. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
If, you know, you said it can be controlled.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a chemical component because the body always responds to the dopamine, which is the high piece. So is that part of the counseling that you're trying to bring in substitutions?
No, you're doing, in the counseling, you're doing more of the emotional regulation. How to control, how to control your emotions so that you don't spike it. That, you know, what to do, like how to stay away from the gambling, like not going to the bars you used to go to and play. If you're going to go to those, if you're going to go to Mine Shaft, you want ask to be seated in the room that the gambling machines aren't there, so you don't see them. So we're doing more emotional regulation. Not a doctor would have to do if they were going to put them on anxiety meds
Well, I
or
wasn't
depression.
thinking so much of an anxiety med, but finding a substitution in the way that there are people addicted to exercise. We know that, and it produces. The
Yep, their dopamine is spiking
That's
there.
their high.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm just wondering, is that ever used as a therapy? Is find other things that can produce a high for you?
Yeah, no, not that I'm aware of. But I'm an art therapist, not a. Yeah. So
Is there any link between like video game playing, poker? Does that
yes, directly linked. A lot of the games they have now, you can buy. If you get so many points or whatever, you can buy these little, what are they called, loots? Like you can buy a knife that has a fancy handle in a different color. And you can earn stuff, but you can't cash out. Generally with those games, you can use the points somewhere else, or you can buy things. You can buy, you know, like if you haven't won any points to get a new outfit for the warrior, you can buy it. But you never can cash out when you have points. It's just directed to another site. But yes, as you get a high like that, a dopamine spike when you win the game, when you get to the next level. So yes, it can be. So, any other questions? All right.
Thank you, Pat.
Good
Thank
job.
you.
And moving on, we will have City Manager Mark Roloff and Parks Director Ray Mauer talking about the future of this committee, what's going on.
Thank you, Judy. I guess you may be aware that the city council had formed a committee to take a look at boards and commissions because we have we probably have about 175 to 200 positions available on boards and commissions, and it's been a challenge filling positions, and so they've been looking at ways to reduce the number of boards and commissions, reduce the number of positions on the different boards and commissions. And as they interviewed different people, they interviewed staff members that were staffing these committees as well as the chairs. So in the case of the Committee on Aging, they had interviewed Judy. And after a lot of deliberation, they took a look at the purpose of each of the committees. And I think, this morning's presentation is a good example of what the Committee on Aging has really become a very good educational resource for the community. Typically, boards and commissions are about advisory to the city council on policy issues, and that hasn't necessarily been a focus of the committee, but the committee's purpose is still very valuable to the community because of what you do. Like I said, today's presentation is a great example of that. I really appreciated the presentation myself. As we were looking at what council had directed us to do about getting rid of some boards and commissions, because this committee hasn't been advisory to council on very many issues, I can't recall the last time there was necessarily a recommendation to council from a
It's been a
policy.
long time, and there has not been the probably opportunities, availability, information-wise, where we could be collaborating more with some of the other committees.
Yeah.
It's been a long time, long before I became chair.
Yeah.
I've been
So-
on the committee 10 years.
So, as Ray and I were discussing, and we brought Gina and then we brought Judy in terms of what can we do to continue the value that the Committee on Aging provides to the community in the way of education, we don't necessarily need a formal board or commission, but the work of this group could continue through programming, through it has to be to keep it on cable TV. Still has to go through a city department, so the natural vehicle for that would be through the senior center. But could we create some programming where we could take exactly what we did today and really incorporate it into some type of programming? So I had some discussions with our staff at Oshkosh Media, and I think we're in a position where we can continue the work of the committee by using this group as more of a stakeholder group, not appointed by the council, because it doesn't need to be appointed by the council, but people who in the community who have a genuine interest in these issues to work on programming and create that through Oshkosh Media. We've done things through the senior center before. You may remember Senior Savvy was one program we've had. So we've had programs before that I think can continue. So we kicked around some ideas with Judy about how we can use this group to create topics of interest, and then figure out a way to make a programming piece similar to what we did this morning. And using Oshkosh Media, continuing to use this room, because I think there's value to that, or the committee could decide another way to do it. But getting programming out there that's relevant for the aging community, and keep doing those things. It may not need to meet as frequently as, say, this committee does right now, but if you met and decided, well, we could do programming, and keep that programming going. And then we would have a vault of topics. This topic, for example, it might evolve over the years. You'll learn something new. Some of the questions you got today, I had the same question. So, maybe there'll be an answer down the road. But if there's nothing new, you keep that programming going for months on end. You could run this program over and over again rather than the program that I do on Oshkosh Media has a very short shelf life. After 2 weeks, that program's pretty much dead. Yeah, thank you. But in reality, this program, for example, has a lot of shelf life, and that creates programming that we can continue to show different times of day, different days of the week, et cetera, to get these types of topics out there. So that was kind of where we were talking. I don't know, Ray or Judy, if you have anything to add to that.
Well, when I was invited to meet with Mark and Ray, I was already exploring an opportunity that had been suggested to me a few years ago by a community business on doing a program dealing with a little bit more broad-based than this committee. So when we started meeting, I think I asked to go first and presented that idea. And the two of them look at each other like, uh-huh. And then it just snowballed from there. And not having to look for a funding source to be able to do a program, to have the city government behind us, to me, that was all a positive. There's so many neat things that can be done. We originally, for our August, we were going to have the Veterans Administration. I was told we already have a program in place for that, if we were to move forward with this idea. One of the other ones that we've not been able to have as a presenter here yet, again, very pertinent to seniors and even some of the younger ones, is dealing with clutter, downsizing. Julie, with getting people moving into the smaller apartments and things. There's a lot of very relevant topics. And having done Helping Hands a number of years ago, for like 15 years, a half-hour program, you can get a lot of information out there. So we could do, if we chose to continue as an advocacy group, doing something like this, we could really have a lot of information out there that could be recycled, reinvented a bit, that would really be of benefit to not only the seniors, not only the people of Oshkosh, but crossing generations, because right now, are we dealing with the Band-Aid approach of taking care of what's now? Or should we be engaging the younger population so that by the time they reach our age, those situations are already taken care of? May not be a challenge at that point. So for me, continuing our folks that we have around the table today, that we've had in the recent past, people that, another thing is, we don't have to have the advance notice of meetings. We can, if we go forward with this, we, as Mark and Ray pointed out several times, if yesterday we had this on our idea of a program, something really amazing or not so good happened overnight, that we could actually change on short notice to address those types of things. There's a lot more flexibility in what's being suggested to us.
Well, I would like to add, I'm the newbie, and I just finished my first year serving on this. Not new to seniors' concerns, because I did spend time at the senior center on the board for 6 years when I was president, and I spent 45 years as a nurse and a lot of elderly people taken care of in that capacity. And I did, my interest in serving was the advising component. Absolutely, I thought there was a role there. And I remember back 10, 12 years ago when there was a, I'm not stepping on anybody's feet, but trying to get the connection between the senior center and the Committee on Aging and better continuity. And I will tell you, I was so impressed when I enjoyed the board, even though they weren't doing the role that I expected. But what this group has been doing in totally educating and getting out information, I was awestruck. There was so much good information, and I thought, I wasn't ever looking at it. And I bet there are so many other people that aren't looking at that piece, but I think that is exactly what I was feeling, and I did talk to Judy, and she probably knew some of this was coming in the works several months ago, because I felt I didn't have a place on this role, because everybody else connected seemed to be connected with a service that is currently providing something for the community. And I didn't have that role.
I'm retired, I don't have those connections anymore.
Well, but you have a, yeah, but so, with what's going.
She does, we know.
Yeah, so I applaud and I like where it's moving to, because I think exactly as you described it is a good and better use of the time and repeating it. And then maybe I do have a role, because if we are generating more of ideas and how do we find it, maybe I do have a purpose, because I was kind of ready to hop out, so.
Well, and I have to say thank you to Mark. He called me before the council decisions report was widespread. He called me on his way home from Madison, and I'm getting ready for the Altrusa conference, and so it was a rather hasty conversation. And then the next morning, he talked to me face to face before he did his welcome to the city. So to show that much consideration and respect back and forth is so, so great, because that doesn't always happen. And I appreciate it. Ray, your comments at that meeting, greatly appreciated. It's being a chair of a committee and trying to meet everybody's expectations is not an easy job. But what I have found in this last, 5 years since I've been chair, the growth of this committee, not necessarily no more members, but I don't think in the last 5 years we've had to cancel more than maybe one meeting for lack of a quorum. That we're getting members on this committee who are really, truly engaged with the committee, with the seniors, with the greater community. And that's not, when I came on the committee 10 years ago, I didn't see that to this degree. So I have to thank all of you. You're really doing something good for the city, for the elders, and this gives us a chance to reach out beyond the city, welcoming people to the city, and welcoming them to participate in our services. Ray?
Thanks, Judy. Just to give a little history, I guess, why I'm here is the senior center manager was placed under Parks back in 2012. So although I haven't been attending your meetings, I do watch them in my office on the computer just to see what's all being discussed. And so I know the important role that each of you play. And Cynthia, I think you hit it on the head. You may not be the expert in an area, but you all have great connections and networking that you can bring those ideas. And whether it's somebody on this committee that can be a presenter, but just looking around the room, you guys have a lot of great connections. And I think Mark and Gene and I realized that and said, we need to continue this somehow. And so when we started brainstorming and talking about how to do this, I think we were positive that Judy was going to accept it. And once we started talking, I think it just started to flow pretty freely. So I think it's a good direction to keep this going and the great work that you guys do.
I think you were overconfident in me.
I have one more question. As this moves in a direction of education, how do you, and you have looked back and said, yeah, we haven't used you in an advisory capacity for a while. I can't think of something immediately, but if an issue comes up, have you thought of how you would, is it a task force possibly, or how would you, surveys, or how would you elicit increased information regarding the concerns of this group.
I'm glad he took the microphone rather than, I thought he was gonna move it towards me. But
No, I think the senior center is a great connection to so many seniors, and again, the networking that Gina's done, and I expect a replacement who's going to be starting in a couple of weeks. If you don't know, Jean's retiring in July 20th.
Youngs?
21st. So, but we have hired her replacement, Dan Braun from, he works at the YMCA currently. He has accepted our position. Actually, he worked many years ago at the senior center. So he is coming back and taking the reins of that. And I think Dan is going to do great things. He will be able to shadow Jean for about 2.5 weeks, which we're thankful for as well. But back to Cynthia's question, I think if some of those topics come up, working with the manager at the senior center, I think would be the first start. I don't see the senior center being a hands-on with this group. I think it's a matter of your group coming up with some programming ideas, running it through the senior center manager, that manager talking to Oshkosh Media to talk about if there's any concerns they see, going back to your group saying, all right, we're good to go with what your programming is. If there are certain things that come up, let's say politically or community-wide, that you want to have some input, I think starting with the manager would be a good start. I'm always available. And you may or may not know Ann Schaefer. She is our marketing and fund developer at the senior center. She works very closely with all the neighborhood associations because she's a shared position between our department, senior center, and the planning division with the city. So having that outreach through the neighborhood groups, I think, is another way that we can get the word out, get information, ask them to attend a council meeting or to contact their council members. So I think going through the senior center will help in those areas.
I think there's the opportunity to, this group, if you identify an issue that's out there, we need more legs to this thing, and that's where the senior center might come in and say, maybe we could do some programming here at the senior center. Alternatively, you may point out something that's more appropriate for ADRC or some other group, but we certainly need to be there at the table in terms of, are there resources that the senior center has that we can lend to whatever that topic may be. But you keeping the awareness on a higher level is probably a good way to get that going and sustain it. We're doing something similar. The Public Arts Committee is also being eliminated, but it's actually, we've had discussions with the museum about incorporating arts and culture and history through the museum. So we're going to continue to have a group of stakeholders to assist us in finishing the work of public arts, which is really a public art ordinance, but then keeping it going, because in order to sustain public art into our culture, there needs to be a place for that. And that's where I see the museum director and I see a larger role. So that's another example of, even though a committee is being proposed to be eliminated, that doesn't mean that the work that group has been doing goes away or should be eliminated. It really just says, how do we sustain that type of activity out in the community? And that's another one that we're doing. And I'm really proud of that. It's been well received by the public art community, and all they want to do is, hey, we really care about this stuff. How do we sustain it? Same thing. It really is, and we have to recognize, do we necessarily need a board or commission for that? No, but do we need the input of members of the community? We absolutely do. That's listening to our customer, so to speak, and I think you represent a good cross section of our community that we can utilize your input and then give you a vehicle through Oshkosh Media to keep getting that message out, which I think is really important.
And it's not just using Oshkosh Media, it's fostering more connections throughout the community, of bringing to us that, we've got, as an advocacy group, we have more latitude in what we're able to do versus the committee. And maybe further down the road can re-evolve back to the necessary meeting of those original ideas and goals. So just reinventing not reinventing, but revising that old wheel. Any other discussion around the table? Any thoughts?
I think it's really going to be about how do you want to sustain the programming, obviously keeping the group together to talk about those topics. And you meet to pretty much plan your programming and then implementing the programming. So towards that end, I've asked Oshkosh Media to keep this hour and a half, so that depending on what you ultimately decide to do. But one of the things we talked about with Judy is this topic. I mean, good that we had a program today, but we could knock this out in a half hour. And then when you're talking about programming, you may create questions. Hey, let's ask this question or that question, or some spontaneous, but keep it within a half hour structure for the Oshkosh Media part of the programming. But if the group gets together and says, well, we want to talk about these 5 topics, well, let's get them programmed over the next, few months. Yeah, you can just keep, and like Judy said, something comes up and it's sort of been off the radar and suddenly, boom, it's on the radar. You can turn on a dime and say, how quickly can we put together a program on this? Can we do it? We can do it tomorrow, or we can do this or that, as long as you can have the flexibility to turn on that dime. And I know that was a struggle within the structure of a public meeting and everything. It's like, we're going to talk about this. You can't, and because you were kind of bound by all those rules. As simply a community stakeholder group, you want to talk about the weather or McDonald's, you can talk about whatever you want. But then also turn on very quickly into, how can we program this? So that would be, I guess, just deciding how you want to start your program planning. But we're going to keep this hour and a half open for you. Here, staff will be prepared to be here for that. I don't know if you'll necessarily need to do it as frequently, because you could probably knock out 2 half-hour programs and do, a program like every other month, and maybe even take the summer off or something. That might just be, pace yourself so you're not, oh my gosh, you're going to get burned out. And then get people coming in or out, depending on their level of interest. I know somebody about this topic. Maybe we can bring them in to strategize on how we want to do this. And you might get a half-year programming out of that, and then that person say, "Okay, I'm cool." And then they can go away. Somebody else can come in. But you want to keep the committee's vibrancy. So figure out a way to do it, but you won't be bound by the structure of the open meetings law, which I know has been a bit of a frustration for this group.
That makes sense to me. Since we're not an advisory board, it does make sense, and I think that it gives us more flexibility. Could potentially give us more flexibility on programs and provide more value to the community, because we don't have the structure.
And, even though I can see how something could evolve. We're doing a nice program later on today at the Senior Center. We're getting a grant from AT&T about connectiveness. And just imagine if that topic had been talked about at this committee, and then the Senior Center says, you guys are on to something. We need to do a program. And I think the programming that we started pre-COVID is perfectly timed, as you can imagine, because people needed that. And now the legs that program has gotten is just phenomenal. The demand for that and the need for it in the community, because people recognize that. I don't know what the next one is. I'm going to leave that to you to decide. What's the next one that we want to jump on? And I think this group could, you guys could create the light bulb that goes off with yourselves and staff to say, maybe we need to do some programming, physical programming at the senior center. Who knows? Or like I said, oh, that one's more like ADRC, but then you become advocates for it. It's like, hey, there's a real issue here. Like I said, I don't know what that is yet, but it's certainly, they're out there. Whether it's problem gambling or social connectedness, whatever it is, you can identify those and create some, great ideas.
There might be an opportunity with Dan Brown, since he's with the YMCA going to the senior center, there could be more of a connection between the senior center and the older adults at the YMCA. Take advantage of that more than it is currently being, potentially.
So, the next July 4th is on a Tuesday, which is normally the first Tuesday of the month. So, we're closed. So, going forward, what date are you thinking about meeting again, or?
That would be, some of that is dependent on when the council actually eliminates our committee.
They did that already, correct?
They haven't done it officially yet, but we've got some ordinance changes to make. The council approved the concept, so staff's been assigned to do those things. We would bring this, I think we can bring it forward, because the idea with this is that the committee is going to simply become a stakeholder group that's going to work on programming on Oshkosh media. So the council will likely do it within the next month. So by the time July 4th rolls around, the committee will be formally disbanded, but informally will continue. So I don't know where you got.
Yeah, we keep talking about flexibility, and by getting you out from under those open meetings laws, Judy can call the group together and you can meet for coffee somewhere. You can have a happy hour or something somewhere, and it gives you that flexibility. And I think going forward, to Gene's point, is if the council does take that action within the next month, you guys can call a group together and start brainstorming on how you want to move it forward, because you can do that at your leisure, and instead of being restricted to having to notice that there's going to be more than 2 or 3 of you together discussing items. And so I would say, Judy, within the next month or so, if the council takes their action, you could start organizing this group, saying, all right, give us some dates, let's plan to meet, and start planning some programming and starting to talk about logistics, maybe about the name of what your group wants to be. And that's, I guess, how I would see it going forward.
And along that line, August 1st would be our next meeting date if we were to continue. And so that date and time is open for us. So if we can come to an agreement, first of all, if we can come to an agreement, this is what we want to do. And second of all, then coming to an agreement when we can get together for discussion. The VA is already committed to coming that day, so that would give us a first taping if we were to go that direction. Any discussion?
I think that Oshkosh does so many wonderful things for our seniors, and I think that we should do something a little bit more fun maybe than just setting a speaker up there. And I see so many active and engaged seniors in our community, and I think they're changing the way people are aging. And I think that that's what we should focus on is, the Tai Chi, and I think those are positive things that we can bring to the community and let the seniors know that there's alternatives out there than sitting at home alone. So I don't know, that's just an idea I had, kind of like on the go with, throughout Oshkosh type of thing.
I think we would benefit from a planning meeting
Yeah.
prior to trying to record something. I think you guys, I mean,
I will be bathing in the lake, but, our discussions were basically there, if there was some simple guidelines, the role that Dan would have to play, just so that he's on board with understanding exactly this transition. And then coming up, like Ray said, with a name. So a planning committee, I think you guys really need to do first, so that you guys are all on the same page of what you're gonna do moving forward. Simple little guidelines is your structure. What are you gonna do each time? Or, yes, it can be tweaked or changed or whatever, but if you have just a little structure, then at least everyone's all on the same page.
And what we want it to look like.
Right, right,
So Dan comes on board, what, the 5th or 6th?
on the 5th.
Okay. He needs to have some time to get a little bit acclimated. So,
Could we use our meeting, our August meeting, just to meet?
you think that would work for him?
Oh, yeah, I don't see any problem. Then you just have to like have the VA come September or something. So if you didn't have the
It's been a-
speaker, if it's
it's been
just a discussion.
Well, could we get together beyond that August meeting then?
Maybe in advance.
Sure.
To have a,
Could we do the August as just a trial?
So do the
Preliminary
VA,
experiment?
have them come in for the taping on that date? I think that makes sense. You've already got them
And
scheduled.
then, and then we could work from there. And maybe like right after the taping, do a discussion group?
Well, the first thing, you gotta break the chains that you've been bound by. And because it's on July 4th, if July 4th wasn't July 4th, on July 4th, we'll plan for the August. Because you've got July 4th what it is, you're unchain yourself and just pick a time to meet, to plan it, and then do August 1st with the taping and go for it. But now you're not bound, so don't do that to yourself. So have fun with it.
My only concern is if there isn't something official about our committee, however you structure it, it's gonna fall by the wayside, is my fear. There's not really a reason to join, there's not really a reason to be involved. And from being involved when I did Senior Savvy for a short period of time, like, it's a lot of work to produce a show, even a half-hour show. So I do hope that we will continue to have some legitimacy under the senior center and staff support, because I think without that, it's not gonna continue long-term.
Yeah, I think some things Gene and I talked about were, we can include things in the monthly newsletter that goes through the senior center. If you've got a program coming up or if you've got an event you want to do, we've talked about on the senior center website, which is the city website, maybe we have a link to this program or your tapings or those types of things. So I think there's a lot of things we can do within the city, within the senior center to help with that as well.
Am I hearing that you want more, I don't want to say legitimacy, but recognition as this group is doing this? And it could be under the senior center, but maybe that's what we discuss at the first meeting too.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you alternate, you plan 1 month and program the next, and do it that way, so that you have a regularity without, you don't have the formality of the public agenda, but you still have to have a structure so that, it's the Tuesday or something like that. You could do that. You wouldn't be on TV for that, because there you're going to be just sitting around a table planning. But we can still make the room available, or you can, like Ray said, you don't have to be bound by where it's at. You can just,
Right.
but disciplining yourself so you don't fall out of the habit. There are good habits. There's also bad habits, as we learned today, but there's very good habits that you want to keep in place, and that may be your way of doing this.
I see that this could be so efficient in the sense that, like I said, I see such a wealth of people that have brought, and just tell what's going on in their organization, and it leads to connecting other things. And if you ever at least increase the awareness through the senior center newsletter and that there is this group that is looking, and purpose is to educate and share information, they can also contact this group. you know, and there's a lot of collaboration that'll be going on. And I could, once you've got a program of how many you want, I don't think, except for those people who are gonna be doing the program, you can plan that out for quite a time and do 4 meetings a year, once we know what we're doing.
She's spying on us when we were talking, those are the types of things.
Oh,
But I
okay.
prefer this group to make those types of
Right.
decisions, but you could find yourself getting yourself into a routine where it's like, you already brainstormed, you may have
Right,
you may
that's what
have
I mean, a whole
darn
list,
near a whole
right.
year of
Yep.
program.
And it's just finding the right connecting people. And I love that half an hour shot, because I think, you know, we're programmed people to sound bites and smaller, so I think the half an hour programming is really good, because people will get the information and not lose interest.
Yeah, breaking it up, it just makes it easier for Oshkosh Media to program it, but also for the public. There's only so much information they can absorb. I'm actually talking about breaking down my half-hour show into 3 7.5-minute segments, or like what they do on TV. You know, you got 7.5 minutes commercial, 7.5 minutes commercial, 7.5 minutes show's over. And it's just, but you may find that yourselves, and then you can take those same things and put them on YouTube videos, because people don't have the
Right.
patience to sit on their phone for a half hour without twitching and going somewhere else. So, but that'll come to you as you evolve. And Judy said it, evolve, I think, is, you know, where do you want to evolve? I don't know. I don't think you know yet, but you'll know it when you see it, and then you'll start doing it. But structure from, as Julie said, there's still got to be a little structure, otherwise it could fall apart. But you'll get your rhythm once you start doing this.
Yeah, and like I said, I think you have to define the role of what the manager is gonna do, because Bobby's not gonna be here anymore. So who's gonna be your communicator, who's gonna be, you know, getting information out, if that, you want that to happen. So having a brief meeting in July, I think would help at least just set some guidelines or rules, simple ones, real simple, because I'm sure they're gonna evolve over time, just to get yourself started. So I don't know what you want to do going forward. And then with this room availability when it's, because I know that it's booked with a variety of city meetings and things, so.
We'll keep this book for that hour and a half every month,
Right.
so you got it.
But in July, if you wanted to.
We talked about an
yeah.
hour and a half just because
Yeah.
of, yeah, we talked about expanding that just so that
Yeah,
if you do a half-hour presentation, then you just need a little break to have that person set up. You just want to make sure, because you, to discipline yourself into a half-hour video or however long it is you want to do that. You may need a couple minutes. If you don't need it, great, but, you know, if you want to talk after the meeting, you never do that. Yeah, you want to talk afterwards, you still got to. So that's
Okay.
why we already talked about that, Bobby Joe, so thanks.
okay, good.
Okay, and I'm looking at the time here now, so it sounds like the group is definitely interested in going forward to continue to be involved as an advocacy group, educational group, information, partnering with the senior center in the city, that really probably, or at least in my mind, combining Julie's idea of the fun things as well as some of the more educational, informational things. And with Joanne, just having watched her in action last month, definitely some really good things out there. The half hour where it's not tied up with all the business and more with the information, the engagement, I think is giving us a whole new world.
Yeah.
Lots of opportunities. So if everyone is okay with that, with that, does anyone have anything that they need to bring up before the meeting ends today?
I'll pass these around. I forgot to pass them out earlier.
Your takeaways.
Takeaways is,
Okay, could I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved. Motion to
We have a second?
I second it.
Oh, go ahead.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Meeting adjourned.